Thank you for bearing with me with ramen school. But we are finally at the point you've all been waiting for. We're going to make our first bowl of ramen. And it's going to be an Afuri-Style Yuzu Shio ramen. So by now, in this series of videos, you should be at the point where you can understand the differences between the different types of ramen. We've made our soup, our chintan, our clear broth. That's here. We've made our toppings, our chashu, and our ajitama, the ramen egg. They're in the fridge, but we'll get to those a little bit later. And now it's about defining the different types of ramen. We've spoken before about the essential elements of ramen. The broth, the noodles, the tare, or the sauce, the aromatic oil, and the toppings. So we've got our broth, the noodles we'll bring in a bit, and we've got our toppings. So the two elements that we need to make today are our aromatic oil and our tare. Tare is essentially the word for sauce in Japanese, and it will define the type of ramen that it is. This is a Shio style ramen. Shio means salt in Japanese, so the main ingredient is salt. The reason we have tare is because we made this stock, our light chintan broth, and we didn't put any salt or seasoning into it whatsoever. The tare is where we add the seasoning. So it's a thick liquid, much more concentrated than this, but it's gonna have the elements of seasoning to it. So seasoning is stuff that you can taste with your mouth. It's not aromas, it's taste. So we've got taste buds for saltiness, we've got taste buds for sweetness. This is some sugar, mirin, additional sweetness. We've got taste buds for umami, so the sake. And something that I think a lot of people leave out of tares, but should be in just about every tare, is vinegar. Because you need that sourness. You don't need the ramen to be sour itself, but you need to counteract some of the bitterness that you get from a long cooked stock. And the best way to do that is with a touch of sourness. Imperceptible, it shouldn't taste sour at all in the ramen, but a touch of vinegar is fantastic in tare. What else is there? We've got our aromatic oil. The aromatic oil is such an important part of ramen. It gives you different aromas that come through when you smell the broth. Usually the thing that you can smell when you walk into a ramen shop is partially the broth, but mainly the aromatic oil that's giving that fragrance to it. Afuri is one of the most popular ramen in Tokyo. It's been around for years and years, and there's always a line at the front door. And their signature ramen is a Yuzu Shio ramen. We're gonna use a Shio tare, and we're also gonna make an aromatic oil with a bit of yuzu in it to give that yuzu fragrance. So we're making an Afuri-Style Yuzu Shio ramen, but this isn't intended to be a copycat recipe. The only reason I wanted to do this is because I wanted to show you how to achieve a particular result in making ramen. For the Afuri ramen, it's got a yuzu fragrance, it's light, it's got a touch of seafood to it, but it's mainly a chicken-based broth. They grill their chashu over charcoal, and they have a bit of mitsuba and ramen egg in there. So that's a style of ramen that I think a lot of people, particularly if you've visited Tokyo, will have been familiar with. To achieve that, obviously you wouldn't use a thick white paitan broth, you use something like the light chintan that we've made. And so that's gonna be our starting point. Our aromatic oil is gonna have a bit of yuzu fragrance in there, also a touch of onion there as well, and some of these iriko, the anchovies. The first thing I wanna do is, now that this broth is chilled, I wanna skim the fat off the top. Now this isn't going to waste. We're gonna put that into our aromatic oil, but rather than keeping the fat in the broth as it is, it's better to add it separately, because then you can control how much you're adding. And ramen is all about control. So I'm taking the fat off the top there, and I'll put that into my pot. And I'll put the broth aside until we need to actually build our ramen. The other elements for the oil are some chicken fat, and this is just fat that I've taken off the chickens that we used to make the broth. Some pork fat as well. Animal fats are much better than vegetable fats because they firstly have a lot more flavor, but they also have a deeper texture than the lighter vegetable fats. I am using some corn oil as well, just to help to render that, and also to give a bit of clarity, because these fats can be quite, as you can see in the broth there, quite opaque. So I want some additional clarity there as well. So I'll add that into my chicken fat, and I'll just chop this pork lard and chicken fat as well. The other thing I want to add in is some of these anchovies. The insides, if they're left in, can add a bit of bitterness, but I just want that anchovy aroma in the oil. Nothing too fishy, so I'm not gonna use too many anchovies, but just take off the head and take out the guts, just with a pinching motion. Okay, that's good for the anchovies. The last ingredient I wanna throw in here is just some spring onion. I can throw that on now, or I can render the fat out first and then throw this on later. I think it's fine to throw it on now, but we just need to start on low heat first and then increase the heat to slightly brown the onions later. I'll get that all onto a low heat to render out the fat from the solids. This looks absolutely fantastic now. There's a lot of oil that's been rendered out of the pork fat there and the chicken fat, and it's taking on a really lovely aroma. Some of the onions, some of that anchovy aroma as well. So I just need to increase the heat now, start to brown the onions a little bit, not too much, but just a little, and then I'll strain that over some of the yuzu we've got sitting on the bench. Yuzu is a citrus fruit from Japan. It has the most amazing aroma. It's not like lemon, it's not like grapefruit, it's kind of unique. And don't ask me where you can get it. I have a tree myself in my garden that I can just go pick some off. You can get it anywhere in Japan, but in your own area, I don't know where you are, but you can probably find this. It's a pretty common fruit these days. It's become a lot more popular than it was a few years ago. I don't want to cook this together with the oil because I don't want to remove too much of the oil and change too much of the oil from the heating of it, but I will infuse this into the oil when it comes off the heat. So I'll just take just the rind from it. The juice from this I'll put into the tare after that comes out as well. But you might ask why some of the ingredients go in the oil and some go in the tare. And essentially the tare is water-based and the oil is obviously oil-based. So it depends on what you want the expression to be. You know, I can infuse some of these oils from the skin into the tare, but I'll get a better result if I infuse oil into oil. The water-soluble juice from this, I could put into the oil, but it would separate out, but it's going into the water-soluble tare. So all of these ingredients and all the ingredients that you can taste with your tongue tend to be water-soluble, and the aroma type ingredients tend to be oil-soluble. So you could ask, say, the anchovies. What do I want to get out of the anchovies? They can give me an umami, water-soluble umami taste from being a dried anchovy, or it can give me a slightly fishy fish oil aroma. So if I put the anchovies into the tare, I'll get a more umami taste. If I put the anchovies into the oil, I'll get more of a fishy aroma. And I wanted to use the anchovies for the aroma, so they went into the oil. So now for the tare. The tare could not be more simple. Salt, sugar, our sake and mirin, and to bind it all together, I'll add about 1 cup of broth that we've already made. This now just needs to go into the heat to dissolve the salt and sugar. And here is our tare. Very, very clear salt shio tare. And to finish that off, I'll add a touch of vinegar and also juice from this yuzu. This is really optional. Yuzu are terrible fruits for juicing. There's so many seasoned things inside, but we will get some yuzu juice out of this. Just a slight bit of yuzu flavor, but mainly the acidity that we want. So our aromatic oil smells beautiful. I'll throw some of my yuzu into the cooling oil, and the remainder that I have here we'll keep for garnish. Let me clear up all of this. We'll get our chintan broth onto the stove to start heating, and we'll start to actually make a bowl of ramen. Okay, so we are ready to put together our bowl of ramen. But let's have a look first at what we're trying to achieve. This is the original Afuri ramen, and you can see a few things about it to start with. We know that it's a Yuzu Shio ramen. We know that there's a clear chintan soup being used, primarily of chicken. And now we can see that the noodles are relatively thin and straight. What else there is also the toppings, obviously. And you can see a few different toppings there. We've got a lightly cured egg, 1 slice of chashu, some menma, the bamboo shoots. The green herb is mizuna. It's a little bit like watercress, just a crunchy Japanese herb. And then on top of the egg, there's a couple of slices of fresh yuzu rind and also a piece of seaweed, nori, sitting on top. So let's start to put those toppings together. Here's our version. We've got the menma, and the shape of the menma you can see in the Afuri ramen was a little bit thinner than this. So I'm just gonna cut that so that we more closely resemble the Afuri ramen that we're trying to achieve. I'll chop my mizuna as well. Same for the yuzu. And lastly, our chashu. Now, having been to Afuri many times, I know that their chashu is grilled over charcoal. I'm not going to put together charcoal just to make one bowl of ramen now, but I'm just going to throw that onto a grill so that it's ready to go. So these are the noodles that we're using. And ramen is always made with an alkaline noodle. These thin yellow noodles are yellow because not from egg, so don't confuse them with egg noodles. They're yellow because they're made with an alkaline component, whether it's baked soda or lye. I will show you how to make your own ramen noodles at some point, but if you're just starting out, definitely find a good quality ramen noodle maker, and there's plenty around, and buy it from them. I think this is one of the most important things that you need for making ramen, because you want to make one serving at a time and you can't be fishing around in the water to get out every single noodle. I know that the noodles that I'm making are going to take 3 minutes to cook, so I'll throw them in here and throw them into the hot water for 3 minutes. I like my noodles as firm as possible, what's known in Japanese as barikata. And you can order noodles if you go to a ramen shop, anything from barikata, which is the firmest possible, through to katame, which is slightly firmer, all the way down to the most yawarakai or soft or stretched noodle you can get. So because of that, I think the noodle should be the last thing that goes into the bowl before the toppings go on. So the first thing I want to get in is the soup. First, I want to use the stock to warm the bowl. So I add the hot stock to the bowl and then pour it back out. It's really important to know the volume of your ladle. It will be printed on most ladles. This is 120 mils, so I know to get the amount that I want, which is 480 mils of stock, I need 4 ladles. The soup's lovely and clear, but of course it's not ramen yet. We need to add our seasoning to that, and the seasoning comes from the shio tare. Measuring spoons are really important. You can use small ladles, but at home I think a measuring spoon is very easy, because you need to know how much tare to add to the soup to make sure it's seasoned correctly. Now for aromatic oil. Now that the noodles are ready, this is a really important part of ramen. You have to use quite a lot of force and shake all the water out of the noodles. The noodles are trapping a lot of that boiling water in there. And so if you just throw them straight into your bowl of ramen, you're actually going to dilute the broth that you spent so many hours putting together. So make sure you get all of the liquid as much as possible out of these noodles before you go anywhere near that bowl. And that is our Afuri-Style Yuzu Shio Ramen.